With the release of Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, it's time to stop and rank all five Indiana Jones films from least to the best. My name is Max Zimmerberg. Welcome back to Max Talks Movies. Today we're ranking all five Indiana Jones films. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe, ring the bell. I do movie reviews, TV show reviews, these types of movie rankings, and also a box office breakdown show every single Monday. So please subscribe, ring the bell. If you're new to the channel, comment down below. Give me your ranking of all five Indiana Jones films. Love to hear everyone's thoughts on this franchise, one of my favorite franchises of all time. Also, please like the video, the thumbs up button. That's how you support this channel. So, a couple things before we get into this review, into this ranking. One, when I do talk about Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, they will be without spoilers. So no spoilers. So even if you haven't seen Dial of Destiny, you just want to know what my list is with the new movie included. There will be no spoilers on this video for this ranking. Without further ado, because there's five movies, let's get into my top five Indiana Jones films. So starting at number five for me, of course, is Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. This for me is easily the weakest film in this franchise. Now, it is for me a really bad movie, and I think there are ideas in here that are interesting for this type of Indiana Jones movie, but this is just really poor execution. It is the one Spielberg film that I watched, one or two or three Spielberg films that I watched where I'm like, I cannot believe this is Spielberg who is directing this. We kind of lose all of the practical effects a lot in this movie. And another thing we lose is just the realness of the situation that we're in. While a lot of this was shot on location, you just really can't tell in this movie. It feels a lot of video game levels of background CGI, having Mutt go through like Tarzan style with the CGI monkeys. There are things that are so ridiculous, but I really do think the beginning parts of this movie do work. Harrison Ford does really work in this movie. The whole scene of him investigating where to find this box in Area 42 with the gun shells, I thought was a really nice idea. The car scene with Mutt and Indy, driving through even like the library, that was probably my favorite like action set piece of the movie. Again, this movie for me is bad on execution. Cate Blanchett is one of the best actresses of all time, and she just is not very good in this movie. First of all, the character itself is just a very generic indie villain, and Blanchett goes in between multiple different accents for this character that kind of pulls me out of the movie with her character. And then you have Shia LaBeouf's Mutt, who is, I think, one of the most is probably the second or third worst team up with Indy out of all the movies. It's nice that they brought back Marion for this movie, but again, Marion kind of just drives the car the whole movie. And the idea of the Crystal Skull, I think the fridge moment was really horrible. The alien moment and the UFO, it always pulls me out of this movie. So there are elements in this movie that I think are interesting, and plots that just weren't executed. You can kind of tell that Lucas and Spielberg had two different ideas, and they try to combine both their ideas into one movie. And for me, it just didn't work. So overall, Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of Crystal Skull comes in number five. At number four is the most recent Indiana Jones film, Dial of Destiny. I did have a fun time watching this movie, especially for me, who, again, well, yes, I wasn't born in the 80s, wasn't alive in the 90s. I did, born in 02, grow up watching the Indiana Jones trilogy a billion times. And it's a franchise that means a lot to me, especially with my movie knowledge. And this was the first Indiana Jones films that I can remember seeing in the theater. I can't really remember if I was 6 years old and my mom and dad took me to see Crystal Skull, but this was the first one I can vividly remember seeing an Indiana Jones from the theater. So this definitely meant a lot to me, especially seeing John Williams' last score. But this movie was fun. Again, Harrison Ford is fantastic in this role. And I got a lot of people, there's a lot of controversial things in this movie, but I like the direction that the setup that they take with his character. He is grumpy and old, but they do give him a realization of all these people that is gone in his life. Again, from Crystal Skull, even his dad is dead, Marcus is dead. He loses a lot, and I like the idea of him not being stubborn and sad in the beginning, but growing into enjoying himself. The action scenes themselves are a lot of fun. Mads Mikkelsen's really solid in his villain role, especially when you get the motive for that character. He becomes a lot more interesting. And I think the ending, I mean, I had chills, almost cried for the very ending of this movie. it was a very well done thing. Sava's inclusion in the movie, I think, felt very right. There were a lot of issues for me, though, with the movie. Phoebe Waller-Bridge, terrific actress. She's just too unlikable for me in the first half of the movie. And the more the movie goes on, the better that character gets. But the first couple scenes with her are just not that interesting. And I think she's too unlikable. I mean, this is an 80-year-old man that she keeps yelling at to do certain things. And at times it just becomes a bit annoying. But again, the second half of the movie, I really like their dynamic. And I think the whole story comes together very well. But again, there aren't any memorable action scenes. And because Harrison Ford is 80 years old, again, the practicalness of the original trilogy is just gone from this movie. And for me, the de-aging in the prologue itself was very exciting, but I was just pulled out of the movie too much with the de-aging. When the character isn't moving or not talking, it looks good. But once young Indy starts moving or starts talking, it just kind of makes it feel like a video game cutscene more than a movie. This is a frustrating one for me. There's a good ideas again in this movie. This is way better for me than Crystal Skull. And I definitely plan on rewatching this multiple times, but for me, it still doesn't touch the greatness of the original trilogy. We go into number 3. That is where we get Temple of Doom. This is the most unique, dark film you could ever get in a franchise like this. Steven Spielberg, George Lucas, Harrison Ford, but really like disavowed this entire movie, including Spielberg saying that the only thing he cares about left from this movie is that he found his wife, Kate Capshaw, in this film. This is more than a disavowed film. I have tons of fun with this movie, and especially the end with the train type thing at the very end of the movie. It brings me back every time to being a 6 or 7-year-old and watching Temple of Doom. It definitely brings me back to being a kid when I watch the third act of this movie. This is definitely the most action-packed movie, but it's clearly the darkest film in this franchise. There is children slavery that is going on, people's hearts getting ripped out, bugs on dead bodies. It is a brutal movie, especially when you rewatch it now. You can see why this really revolutionized the idea of a PG-13 rating for a movie. But again, I think this is another great example of what to do with the Indiana Jones character. He's just kind of thrown into this mix to find these rocks, and he doesn't even want to do it. He's here for fortune and glory. And then once he goes, he realizes all these kids are being enslaved and all these people. Then he wants to save the day. I love Short Round in this movie, Ke Huy Quan, and this is not because I love everything everyone wants in him. He's terrific. I've always been a big fan of Short Round. The scene where Short Round and Indy are playing cards together, and they're both joking around how they're cheating. They are a great dynamic in this movie. When Indy goes and he drinks the blood and he becomes a villain for the next 15-20 minutes, it is fascinating to watch. And it's a terrific performance from Harrison Ford. This might be the movie with his best performance in it because of the range of emotions that he has to convey. Also with Short Round, he gets to help. He saves Indy 3 or 4 times throughout the movie, which I thought was a nice touch. I just love how different it feels from Last Crusade and Raiders. It feels vastly different, and I really like that. Now, yes, I do think the action scene, especially with getting out of the plane and falling through a raft and that whole thing, I think definitely was a bit too ridiculous, but I still have a lot of fun with that scene. Willie, for me, is my least favorite main character of the Indiana Jones films. Again, nothing having to do with Kate Capshaw. It's not really not her fault, but the script is she's the most stereotypical damsel in distress you'll see in a blockbuster film. She's whining the whole time. She complains when she's getting shot and her life's on the line that her nails are being destroyed. It's an annoying character that I've never liked since I was a kid. And the more I watch the movie, the more I get more annoyed with Willie. So I just wish, especially coming off of Marion and Raiders, this is a big step down in relationship. I don't think this movie does have the emotional points that both Raiders and Last Crusade get to. So Temple of Doom, I really do love this movie. I know a lot of people don't really like it, but I'm definitely a big fan of Temple of Doom, but it's still, again, not even close to the perfect films I think the next 2 films are. And number 2 for me is Raiders of the Lost Ark, the very first Indiana Jones film all the way back in 1981. Still holds up today as one of the most revolutionary films of all time, as every adventure film since 1981's Raiders of the Lost Ark has to use this type of formula. It's everything clicking. It's kind of like, magic in the bottle, sorry, lightning in the bottle moment where you have George Lucas, who just came off doing Star Wars, still obviously in the middle of Star Wars. This came out after 4 years after, sorry, 4 years after New Hope and 1 year after Empire Strikes Back. But this put Harrison Ford as a leading man in Hollywood, not just a sidekick, a fun sidekick character. This really, with Jaws, of course, put Spielberg on the face as well. And you have the iconic Harrison Ford of Spielberg, Lucas, and John Williams forming one of the most important films, I think, of all time. It's a classic adventure film. The opening scene is fantastic with Indy, one of the best character reveals that you'll see. Belloq, for me, is still the strongest villain that this franchise has had to offer. Sallah is my favorite side character that we've had with Indy in the past. The great balance too of Indy just being a regular person. He's not the prototypical hero. He's not even that great of a dude. He is going after this again for the opportunity to be a part of the CIA for a quick second. He's not doing this to put in a museum or this or that. He learns more as the movie goes on. The amazement of finding these artifacts is still special to this day. One of my favorite scores of all time, with John Williams, starting with this Indiana Jones theme. The car chase, my favorite car chase scene in any movie ever made. The intensity of it, going from a horse to the car, falling from underneath, and you can just tell how practical everything is. You can tell even the stunt person or Harrison Ford himself gets himself dirty into this movie. Marion, for me, is still by far the best love interest that Indy has had, and her even character intro is so iconic to this day. I really do adore this movie, especially the ending with all the villains dying in the way they do, and having a character who doesn't believe, just thinks it's a piece of an artifact just to be put in a museum, and understanding the craziness of what this franchise has had to offer. It is such a special movie to this day, and I understand that it's number one for a lot of people. It's my second favorite Spielberg movie, but for me, my favorite Spielberg movie of all time and my favorite Indiana Jones film of all time is Last Crusade. This is one of the best endings to a trilogy of all time, and it's one of my favorite movies of all time. Last Crusade is fantastic. I just rewatched it last week leading into Dial of Destiny, and it just never gets old. And that's really because of the dynamic, iconic duo of Harrison Ford and Sean Connery. You think it couldn't get more iconic in a casting role than Harrison Ford as Indiana Jones, but then you add Sean Connery as Henry Jones, and it leads for my favorite father-son duo in a movie of all time. This is easily the funniest Indiana Jones film, but I also think it's the most emotional Indiana Jones film. The reason why I think this film is better than Raiders is that there are real stakes and things on the line for Indy. And again, Indy is not here to go after the Fountain of Youth. That is not why he is going after what he's going after. The only reason why Indy goes on this journey, and also Marcus wants to join on this journey as well, is to save Henry. And then Henry's the one who educates Indy on why this is important, why the Nazis should not be getting it. But this movie has some of my favorite jokes of all time when Henry blows up their own plane and he blames the other people for it. The back and forth between Harrison Ford and Sean Connery is fantastic in this movie. I also think it's refreshing to have an Indy movie where Indy doesn't have a love interest. Also, the villains get revealed super early in this movie, so there's no big plot twist without that. And nothing is as more intense in this franchise when Henry gets shot, basically dead, and Indy has to complete the 3 trials that his father has been preparing his entire life for. The fact that his dad wrote all these things down, never found it. Now Indy has to complete these 3 challenges. It's so emotionally satisfying. One of my favorite endings to a movie ever, with Indy, Marcus, Henry, and Sallah riding off into the sunset. This is a perfect film. My favorite Spielberg movie, and Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade comes in at number 1. What's your Indiana Jones ranking? Again, for me, Last Crusade, number 1, Raiders, number 2, Temple of Doom, number 3, Dial of Destiny, 4, Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, 5. Let me know your ranking in the comment section down below. I'll talk to you guys soon.